Chapter 10. A New Dress. I don't know how I could have managed to complete my task if it hadn't been for the electric lamp Inge brought to me, and the special magnifying glass that she borrowed from somewhere. The magnifier looked like the kind that Mr. Apramyan, our town jeweler, used to use when he was doing repairs. It was like a one-lens eyeglass. With it fitted over my right eye, I could see every twist and bend in each silken knot. With painstaking care, I used 2 sewing needles to untangle the VF from the first handkerchief. As I feared, where the stitches had been, holes remained. When I restitched IP, I tried to incorporate the old holes as best I could. "Give me that," said Inge, snatching the jeweler's loop from my brow. I held my breath as she examined the stitchwork on my first altered handkerchief. "This is magnificent," she declared, handing the loop back to me. "Honestly, I didn't think you could do that." I exhaled in relief, oh so thankful that she approved. I knew that there were still some damaged fibers that showed through, but if she didn't notice them, I wasn't going to point them out. The rest of the handkerchiefs were easier now that I had done one, but it still took me the entire morning to complete them. My head was pounding by the time the whistle blew for lunch. "Come back early if you can," said Inge. "There is so much work for you to do." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I felt like slapping her. I stood in line for my turnip soup and colored water, craning my neck, looking for Yuli. I found her at a table in the back, sitting with a pale-faced Zhenya. "Luca," I said to her urgently as soon as I sat down. "How is he?" Yuli met my eyes and smiled. "He is going to be fine," she said. "Once they washed away the blood, it turned out to be not such a bad wound. They stitched his leg, no broken bones." I was so overwhelmed with relief that I thought I was going to cry. "Is he still in the hospital?" Yuli put a spoonful of her meat soup in her mouth and swallowed. "They're giving him injections to make sure he doesn't get an infection. He should be out in a couple of days." My heart sank. "Injections?" Yuli shook her head. "Don't worry," she said. "He's in one of the good rooms. They are treating him." But I did worry. I took a spoonful of my turnip soup and swallowed down a vile lump, then turned to Zhenya. Her skin was papery white and her eyes looked huge. The repair I had done on her dress was not holding up very well. One shoulder was covered by mere threads. She picked up her tin cup and sipped some of the colored water. "What job do they have you doing in the kitchen?" I asked. "Peeling potatoes," she said. My stomach grumbled at the thought of all the potatoes she must have seen. "Were you able to sneak any extra bites?" She shook her head. "The cook was watching me like a hawk, but it's better in the kitchen than in the factory." She smiled. I smiled back at her, then caught Yuli's eye. "I need to see Luca." Yuli looked at me with alarm. "He will be out in a few days. You can see him then." I stared down at my bowl of soup. Yuli was right. It would be easiest to wait, but I had an ache in the pit of my stomach every time I thought about him. Until I saw with my own 2 eyes that he was fine, the ache would stay there. "Is the medical staff at lunch?" Yuli nodded, tipping her head slightly in the direction of the far corner. "They're mostly here now." I picked up my bowl and gulped down the rest of my soup, then stood. "See you later, Yuli and Zhenya." I touched my lips with my index finger, and they were both silent. I could feel 2 pairs of eyes on my back as I walked out. There wasn't much time left before lunch would be over, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself by hurrying. I took my bowl, cup, and spoon to Barrack 7 without washing them first, then walked with what I hoped looked like nonchalance towards the hospital. The only person I passed along the way was the warden of one of the other barracks. She hurried past me as if I didn't exist. When I got to the hospital, I pushed open the door and stepped into the main hallway. The cool, medicinal air enveloped me, and I was struck by the eerie quiet. I was relieved to see that the receptionist was not there. I poked my head into the first room. Each bed was filled with a sleeping Ostearbeiter. They all looked clean and bandaged. Odd that they were all asleep at the same time. Is this what the injections were for? I was about to step back into the hallway when I heard footsteps. I hid behind the door and watched as a nurse walked into the room and took the pulse of a patient, marking something down on her clipboard as she finished. My own pulse raced and I held my breath. She checked on a few more patients, then walked out the door. I waited until she was in the next room, then darted out of the hallway and into the third room. Luca was there, and like the others, he was fast asleep. I stood at his bedside, my heart pounding. Should I wake him or leave him alone? His face was too pale, but he looked well cared for. I brushed my fingertips gently through his short black hair. His eyes opened. "Lida," he whispered, clasping my wrist with a strong grip. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on you." He smiled. "I'll be fine." His eyebrows knitted into a frown. "I'm glad you came. There is something I need to tell you." He pushed himself up to a sitting position and looked around at the other hospital beds, making sure that everyone else was still asleep. He crooked his finger and I stepped in more closely. "If we are separated," he whispered, "I will find you after the war." I looked at him in alarm. "Do you know something?" "Go. You cannot get caught in here." Before he could stop me, I planted a light kiss on his forehead. "I want you out of this place." Luca smiled. "Me too." I stepped behind the door just as the nurse walked into the room. I waited until she was busy with a patient, then slipped out. I hurried down the hallway, but when I opened the front door, Yuli was waiting there. "Hide around the corner," she said. "Two of the nurses are on their way." I slipped around the side of the building, waited a few minutes, then scurried back to the laundry. My heart was still pounding by the time I got there, but I couldn't stop grinning. I had seen with my own eyes that Luca was fine, and I hadn't got caught doing it. Altering the monogram on Inge's fur coat was relatively easy. The black satiny material that lined the coat seemed to smooth back into its original weave as soon as the red stitches were removed. It was like embroidering on completely fresh cloth. It took me less than an hour. I had left the blouse until last. The label was narrow, and the material itself was slippery, so it was difficult to hold on to, let alone to remove stitches from. Before I started, I sketched the ornate letters onto a piece of paper so I would remember what they looked like. Inge wanted her name to be embroidered in a similar fashion. I sketched out Inge's name in a few different styles on the paper and let Inge choose, because it was better to make mistakes on paper than on that delicate fabric. Inge was so pleased with my work that she took the blouse from me as soon as I was finished and put it on over top of her work smock. The blouse was tight on her, and I was horrified at the thought of her ripping it to shreds and then expecting me to fix it. But what could I say? "You look beautiful," is what I decided on. Inge grinned. She ran into her office at the back and grabbed the fur coat, slipping that over top of the blouse. She twirled around, and the coat flared out, swirling in soft lushness, the scent of rosewater wisping to my nostrils. "You are such a divine little worker," said Inge. "I would like to reward you." She hurried back to her office. When she came back, she was no longer wearing the fur or the blouse, but in her hand was a waxed paper package tied with a string. "Here," she said. "As your reward, I saved you half my lunch." My mouth filled with saliva at the thought of the delights in that package. Each day she ate 2 sandwiches, always thick slabs of meat between generous slices of freshly baked bread. Even through the paper, I could smell garlic, onion, caraway, beef. Against my will, my hand stretched out and caressed the paper. "Take it! You deserve it!" I held the wrapped sandwich in both of my hands. This was the most precious gift I had ever received. How I longed to tear the package open and gobble down the sandwich. But the sandwich would be gone in an instant. And after eating that and enjoying it, how could I go back to the turnip soup and the colored water? I pulled my hand away and clutched it on my lap, willing it to be still. "Please, ma'am," I said, looking into her eyes. "This is very generous of you, but what I would really like is a new dress." Her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. "A new dress? But you get to wear a clean smock every day." She looked down at my bare feet. "Maybe a pair of woolen socks instead?" How wonderful it would be to have a thick pair of socks, especially with winter approaching. But how long would they last? My feet still ached constantly, especially at night. It was tempting to say yes to the socks, but if I wore socks, how would that make Zhenya feel, who was nearly naked in her ripped dress, and Ivanka and Natalia and the others in my barracks? Me wearing socks was sure to make them feel worse about their own situation. "My friend Zhenya," I told her. "She was injured yesterday in the bombing. But aside from that, her dress was ruined. That's why I'd like a new dress." Inge's eyebrows rose, and a look of astonishment transformed her face. "You would give a well-earned gift away to someone else?" I bowed my head and stared at her shoes. "Yes, ma'am, if that's allowed." Her warm hand brushed my shoulder. "You are just like my husband. He works hard for the luxury goods he acquires, but then he sends them to me." She brought in a huge basket of clothing for mending and sorted through it, a look of concentration in her eyes. "I can't give you anything too fine, because it will only cause problems for you. Not this, not this. This is too good." She looked up at me. "Ideally, I'd like to give you a smock, but they're not mine to give." She continued sorting through the basket, then pulled out a flannel shirt, dark blue with a torn sleeve. Her eyes lit up. "Stand," she said. "Let's see how long this is on you." She held it up to my shoulders. The shirt came down practically to my ankles, but it would work for Zhenya. She was taller than me. "Ah, this is perfect," she said, handing it to me. "Are you sure you wouldn't like a pair of socks instead?" I took the precious shirt and cradled it in my arms. It felt substantial, and it smelled clean. My eyes filled with tears. Inge had not beaten me or yelled at me since I had gone to work with her, but this was the first time she had treated me with real human kindness. "Thank you, ma'am," I said. "This shirt is perfect." I was so grateful that I felt like hugging her, but I thought better of it. "Your generosity is appreciated." Inge smiled. "I've always prided myself on my generosity." I kept that dark shirt beside me as I started in on the mending that had accumulated in the laundry basket. I could hardly wait until the whistle blew and I could give my gift to Zhenya. She would be so surprised. The anticipation of her pleasure lifted the cloud of sadness that had hovered over me since Larissa and I had been captured by the Nazis. Most of the time I felt so powerless, and that is the worst feeling of all. But the joy of seeing Luca and being able to help Zhenya made the difference between hope and despair. When the 6 o'clock whistle blew, I changed into my own rags and burst out of the laundry house door, the shirt clutched to my chest. My face and arms smashed into something solid. I fell into the dirt, landing on my hands and knees. The shirt flew out of my grip and landed in a cloud of dust. In front of my face was a pair of black boots, shiny through a light veneer of dust. I looked up. It was the roll call officer. "So the little seamstress is a thief." I snatched the shirt from the ground and stumbled to my feet. I stood at attention before him, acutely aware of my filthy dress. "Officer, I did not steal this shirt." "We'll see about that." He grabbed me by the ear with such force that I thought he would pull it off. He opened up the laundry house door and hollered, "Inge, get over here." Drawers closed and doors opened out back. Inge walked into the washing room, wearing her newly personalized fur coat. She looked at me quizzically, then at the officer. "What is the problem, Officer Schmidt?" "Did you give this girl a shirt?" Inge put her hands on her hips and glared at the man. "I did." He let go of my ear. I exhaled. "You shouldn't be giving the Osterbiters presents, Inge." "It's an old shirt of my husband's, too worn to be mended." "You will spoil her." "Have you seen what she can do?" Inge said. "She can sew." "Saying that Lida can sew is like saying Wagner can compose a pretty tune. I'll show you." She slipped off the fur coat and showed him her monogram. I was astounded that Inge would stand up for me in this way. He looked at it dismissively. "It cannot be difficult to sew a few letters in place." Inge's eyes flashed with anger. She looked over to me. "Go, Lida. I shall see you tomorrow morning." I stepped out and closed the door behind me, but I was curious what she was going to say to Officer Schmidt without me there. I cupped my ear against the door and got wisps of the exchange. She must have shown him my other work. I caught words like deft, tiny hands, attention to detail, patient. There was a pause in the conversation, and I didn't want to be caught eavesdropping, so I left. When I got to Barracks 7, it was empty, so I folded up the shirt and slipped it under my pillow. I went to the bathhouse and washhouse, then back to the barracks. Zhenya came in moments later, so exhausted that she collapsed onto her bunk with just a nod in my direction. She pulled her covers up to her chin and groaned in relief. I pulled the shirt from under my pillow and sat on the edge of her bunk. "I have a surprise for you, Zhenya," I said, holding it out. She looked at the cloth and asked, "What is that?" "Open it," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. I shook out the shirt so that it opened. Zhenya's eyes widened. "You didn't steal that, I hope?" I shook my head. "Inge gave it to me, a present for my stitch work." "That is wonderful," said Zhenya. "It is so much better than the tattered dress you're wearing." "But Zhenya, this is for you." Zhenya propped herself up on her elbow and stared into my eyes. "You cannot give this to me. You worked so hard for it." "Your dress is falling apart," I said. "You need this more than I do." Zhenya blinked back tears. "She should have given you something for yourself, a pair of shoes or something to eat." She looked down at my scab-encrusted feet. "Maybe you should rip this into strips to wrap your feet with." "You know they wouldn't last long," I told her. "Besides, I want you to have this. I have a good smock that I wear all day when I'm working, and it's clean in the laundry, so my feet are healing. Do you want to be walking around naked? Your dress is not likely to last much longer." "Thank you, Lida. Thank you. Zhenya reached out and gripped my hand. We can save what's left of my own dress for patching. She slipped into the shirt, and even though she was taller than me, it was still huge on her. We were all not much more than skeletons, after all. She took it off. We were trusted with needle and thread, but not scissors, so I carefully tore off the sleeves so I could adjust it, then picked apart the seams on either side of the shirt, so I had one big piece of cloth and two smaller pieces. With the big section of material from the back, I stitched a sleeveless dress for Zhenya. I was in the midst of all this sewing when the other girls entered the barracks. Katarina picked up the two front panels of the shirt and held them up to me. There's more than enough to make yourself a new dress out of this. Do you need the buttons? I shook my head. While I finished up Zhenya's seams, Katerina picked at the button threads with the sharp end of a sewing needle. Once the buttons were all removed, she stitched the two front sections together. My sleeveless dress needed to be several inches shorter than Zhenya's, which meant that there was plenty of cloth left over. We worked at it gingerly so the cloth would tear straight. With these bits and scraps of sturdy blue flannel, plus my old dress and what was left of Zhenya's old outfit, Mary and the others were able to patch their own clothing. Every single girl in Barrack 7 got a bit of cloth. I fell asleep with a smile on my lips for the first time in a very long while. It had been a good day. I dreamt that my mother was bending over me, brushing my forehead with her lips. Beauty can be found anywhere, she whispered. I longed to open my eyes and see my real mother hovering over me, keeping me safe. The dream was so real that I could almost feel her warm breath on my cheek. Mama's face dissolved and was suddenly replaced by Luca's. Stay safe, little sister, he said. His lips continued to move, but I could no longer hear the words. Luca, I cried. What are you saying? My eyes flew open. The image had been so real that I almost expected Luca to be hovering over me, but he wasn't there. I was thankful that I had gone to see him in the hospital, to know that he was safe. Dreams can so quickly turn to nightmares, after all.